Safeguard our flank. Part 6. The German trenches. In February 1916, when Joffre intended to offer up an offensive riposte to areas north and south of the Somme, he passed over the French 10th Army front to the British. By spring 1916, Allenby's Third Army held the land to the north of Hebuterne, and the Fourth Army land to the south. This area of combat was changed after the second day of the battle to call the Reserve Army. The Fourth Army sector was concentrated further south, on Becourt. The French had been the temporary custodians of Francoville and Hebuterne. This was French land, and they wanted the invaders out. This attitude describes the psychological moment. The British wanted to get the war over and return home. The French wanted their usurped land back. Both wanted movement, not static defence. The Germans, on the other hand, had taken the land, its resources and industry, and had for the moment other fish to fry. They were also fighting the Italians and the Russians, and not in any hurry to move. In which case they thought, why not make the station comfortable and secure, which is what they did. The German command had to instill discipline and order to make their men happy, so they set the men to work to make the line impregnable, letting the local commanders devise the best ways to make their front efficient and military daunting to the enemy. There's no better way for a leader to get cooperation than to give them a chance to make their life more comfortable. The German trenches were in the main 15 feet or more, with dormitories, cookhouses, latrines and wash areas, stores and armories, all cut or buried into the ground, boarded and propped. Stairs, companionways with reinforced head cover, wattle and board trench sides and raised duckboards. Gun positions, machine gun nests, trench mortar pits, pillboxes, sentry box, observation and periscope sites, all frequently constructed using concrete. The trench system was linked to communication trenches running back to their rear lines, with tunnels leading to vital sectors, many lit by electricity, and the sides taking telephone wires. Isolated hamlets, villages and factories, bisected by the front line, adapted and converted into fortified positions as forts along the wall. The German artillery and machine guns were laid and registered onto key British positions with the distances indicated by marker stakes. This preparation allowed for immediate firing, each gun capable of overlapping lanes of fire with their next along the trench, to cover the open ground ahead and, where possible, enfilade on either flank. All along the front, banks of staked barbed wire, many yards thick, ran out into no man's land. It was these well-constructed trenches that the first, then the second wave had to suppress, navigate and pass through, allowing the third wave to clear by bombing and taking prisoners. Further waves brought along spare ammunition and grenades, and later waves got down into the trench to reverse the firing step and open up access points, clearing blocked intersections and shell damage. Finally, the stretcher bearers attended to the wounded and to the dead. All this had to be negotiated and made secure before a breakout could attack the enemy rear. All this was to come if all went well. During early May, the 46th Division was out of the line resting at their billets. After the mud, cold and wet of Vimy, they appreciated the better weather, the good billets, and the excellent country in which they found themselves. The Château de Lathieu and the gateway stands on the edge of a forest a few miles from Midland. As in all out-of-line camps, fatigues were carried on. In this case, the men made revetments to line trench sides. The 56th Division marched to Suastre, continuing their training much as the 46th were doing at Lathieu. A fortnight later they set off again, to march to Hebuterne, whilst the 46th occupied their billets at Fonqueville. Both these villages held old French lines prepared in 1914. The 16 or so miles both divisions had to make were completed in the morning. Divisional headquarters allowed them 2 days' rest, exploring their local villages, doing some washing and having a canvas bath. Shouldering their rifles, they formed up again to march into Magnicourt. There they continued practicing attacks and had further instructions on bombing and another exhibition of the German flamethrower, being told its uses and problems. The generals were continually thinking of ways to keep the men occupied to prevent boredom and slack ways. The Germans had launched a massive attack on the French line at Verdun on the 21st of February 1916, and the battle was still raging. The French had lost almost 500,000 men. To alleviate the strain on the French, it was decided that the British should make a strong attack on the Somme. Although the battle had been given the name of the Somme, it was in fact the Battle of Ancre, another river more central to the action. This battle was not planned in isolation. The policy was to keep pressing the Germans on all fronts in unison, which included the Italians and the Russian fronts. All units had to send in night attacks and take prisoners and extract information about the opposing formations. The main battlefront lay between Gommecourt to the north and Maricourt in the south. On the north of Ancre lay the village of Beaumont-Hamel and Serres, 4 miles south of Gommecourt. The Somme is the name for a French administrative department, taken from the name of the river which runs through the region. The part held by the British was the northeast corner, overlapping into the next department, the Pas-de-Calais. This region of France formed part of the old province of Picardy. An old Roman road linked its cathedral city, Amiens, and 2 smaller towns of Albert, northeast of Amiens, and further still, Bapaume. The region was crossed by 2 rivers, the Somme and the smaller Ancre. The Germans were defending their gains, the Allies intent upon pushing them back. The former constructed deep secured trenches and dugouts while developing small villages into miniature forts. The latter believed such tactics created a sit-it-out attitude, and the British High Command trusted to mobility and attack. And what was typical, the Germans always seemed to hold the high ground. Not only could they observe what was going on, but knew that any attack had to be made uphill. They were more interested in securing a defensible position more than land. If this suggests that their leaders were more able, militaristic and forward-thinking, perhaps they were. What was true is that they were on somebody else's land, and their surprise came by road, not by sea. As the advantage in war always favours the attackers, the Germans held the stronger positions. Both sides were at this time depending on attrition, pounding their opponents into the ground. Not very subtle, but the victor would be he who could sustain it longest. Putting in attacks that held no chance of being sustained or planned to end the campaign, wasteful. The Battle of the Somme is a case in point. It was never envisaged that it would finish the war, and it certainly never had sufficient resources. The result was stalemate. Both sides were soaked in blood and worn out, for it all had gone on through again. Did the powers that be ever learn any lessons? I'm not sure they did, and the age of the tank and the American intervention was to come.